Tragedy today in Wellington Harbour. The inter-island ferry Wahine foundered off Fort Dorset with 744 passengers and crew aboard. There's been serious loss of life, but exact details are not yet available. It's known at least 40 are dead, but this figure could be much higher. Hundreds of survivors are in hospitals and emergency centres in Wellington and the Hut. First indication of trouble came as the Wahine, on its way north from Littleton, tried to enter the harbour in a storm with winds gusting to 100 knots. The vessel hit Barrett's Reef, but managed to get clear, and for most of the morning lay about a quarter of a mile off Fort Dorset with her anchors dragging. Then, early this afternoon, came the first sign of real trouble as the Wahine took a sudden list. Soon the water deck was down to water level and life rafts and boats went into the water. Many of the boats were useless, held high out of the water by the steep list. Police and rescue workers stood up to shoulder deep in the surf to carry the shot and the injured to waiting ambulances and buses. Piles of blankets were brought for the survivors, and Seatoun residents kept up supplies of soup throughout the day. Reports say some of the lifeboats were swept onto rocks. This was one of the luckier ones. It was the first lifeboat to reach the shore on Seatoun Beach. Many of the people in it were treated on the beach by teams of doctors. Wellington's entire ambulance fleet stood by as the more serious cases were brought in. By late afternoon, about 50 people had been taken to Wellington Hospital for treatment. Some of the small craft engaged on rescue operations landed in the Eastbourne area, and casualties from these boats were rushed to Hut Hospital. The Picton ferry Aramoana and the police launch Lady Elizabeth headed the rescue operation, but as the wind dropped and the seas grew less dangerous, many small craft and even surf boats went out to look for survivors. The Wahine, an almost new vessel, was brought onto the Wellington to Littleton run to start the road ferry service between the two ports. She bore a fated name. Her namesake, the 4,500-ton troop ship, foundered some years ago after hitting a reef 300 miles north of Darwin, but on that occasion there was no loss of life. As the first survivors reached the beach this afternoon, some were able to give details of the last moments of the Wahine.
What exactly happened?
Well, at 6:15, we had over the interstate, the intercom. We had instructions for the passengers.
Get in the van, boy.
To put on their life jackets and proceed to the B deck. And they did that. There was no panic. Everything went quite smoothly, and they sat around there for about 2 hours. And then we all thought there was no danger of it sinking, actually. And they had cups of tea and sandwiches, all that sort of thing. It wasn't until the last couple of hours that she started to really go.
At what stage did you really think it was serious?
about an hour and a half before she went down.
And was there any panic getting the people up?
There wasn't, not until I got onto the decks.
And then what happened?
There's a fair few on the port side, and that was the side that they shouldn't have been on, because they couldn't lower new life rafts from it.
Right. Any idea how many are still on board?
None as far as I know.
When they abandoned ship, me and my mate said, we'll grab a kid each. He grabbed a kid, I grabbed a kid. I lost mine when she went, and Laurie, I haven't seen him since.
No one was left behind, were they?
As far as I know, there's quite a lot out there in jackets.
In the water?
Oh, they're picking them up now.
Are they?
What was it like actually in the lifeboat itself?
It was all right, quite good once we got in the boat, but I got into a raft, and the raft was punctured. It collapsed. We all had to bail out from the raft and make for the lifeboat, you know.
Did it collapse immediately hit the water eventually?
It was punctured before it got into the water, and when a few of us got in it, it just...
The main casualty clearing station for survivors was set up at the Wellington railway station. Here, a check was made on the names of survivors. The injured went to hospitals, others went to stay with relatives, still others are being billeted tonight. The latest report says about 75 people from the Wahine are now in hospital. Their injuries are mainly broken limbs and prolonged exposure. At least 5 young children are tonight in hospital without having been identified. Many families were split up as the order to abandon ship was given. The Minister of Transport, Mr. Gordon, was among those at Wellington Station.
How bad was it?
Oh, it's fairly wet.
What was the reaction of the people when the call first came to abandon ship?
Well, some of them went the wrong side at first, I believe. I don't think they knew what was the starboard side from the port side. But it was okay. The crew handled it pretty good, I think.
How bad was the ship listing before you started to get off?
Pretty badly. Very badly, I would say.
How did you get down into the water?
Jumped onto the lifeboat. They lowered the lifeboats about halfway down. We jumped into them, then they lowered them the rest of the way down.
Did you see anybody in the water at all?
Yeah, when we got our lifeboat full and clear, there was a lot of people jumping in the water, especially from the stern.
Now, how did those people fare?
They were picked up by the other lifeboats. We picked some of them up.
Did you see many children at all?
Yes, the ones that came into our boat. I didn't see any in the water at all.
And how were the kiddies reacting?
Very well, I would say.
Oh.
Can I ask you what it was like out there?
It wasn't too nice in the sea.
Yes. How did you get off the boat yourself?
Swamped.
Your lifeboat got swamped. How did you get into the lifeboat?
Had to jump
How far did you have to jump?
from the second deck, I suppose.
Second deck. Were you frightened at all before the call came out to abandon ship that you'd have to go over the side?
Well, I think we should have been told much sooner. And the worst part was getting to the lifeboats. The deck was so slippery.
How long were you told before you had to abandon ship?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Did everybody know where to go?
We were told to go on the starboard side, but that was impossible because it was so slippery and such a list.
Were you given any drill before you went over the side? Any lifeboat drill? Was there any chance to give you lifeboat drill?
Bodies from the Wahine have been brought to shore at many points around the harbour. Bodies have been recovered from the eastern beaches from Pencarrow to Eastbourne. Tonight, the police are continuing the search for other bodies. The Union Company's managing director, Mr. F.K. McFarlane, has expressed his company's sympathy to those bereaved and who have suffered hardship and injury. The search of the harbour for the last of the survivors and for bodies is continuing throughout the night in the area of the wreck. A large number of harbour board and private craft have already begun the search using lights. The Wellington police appealed a short time ago for survivors of the Wahine who have not already contacted the police to do so immediately to enable their names to be checked with the passenger list.
The aftermath of tragedy. The inter-island steamer Wahine lies on its side today at the mouth of Wellington Harbour. Around it, small boats have been keeping up the search for victims of the disaster, and tonight only 6 people are unaccounted for. Official lists show that 566 passengers and 110 crew are safe, and 46 bodies have been found. To repeat the figures again, 566 passengers and 110 crew safe, and 46 bodies have been found. This means only 6 are still missing. The police emphasize that there's a possibility of duplication in the list of survivors, so the number of people missing may increase slightly. The search for bodies is to continue for the next 2 days at least. Volunteers from mountain clubs have been asked to help tomorrow and Saturday and possibly Sunday as well. A preliminary inquiry into the disaster began in Wellington today. Statements have been taken from survivors and from crew members. The wreck has sunk deeper into the harbour. Yesterday the funnel was clearly visible. Now it's beneath the waves. The ship was carrying 68 cars and 25 tons of general cargo and had 144 bags of mail aboard. The harbour was closed early this morning, and the Wahine's sister ship Maori had to wait off the heads for some hours before it was allowed to edge past the wreck and make its way to the inter-island wharf. Skin divers went out to the wreck today to have a good look at the ship. There'd been a report from one rescue craft that tapping had been heard coming from inside the hull. They checked all along the ship and looked in every porthole, but found nothing. Later, the police said that skin divers investigating the wreck have found that there's no sign of survivors aboard the Wahine. All available police have been working around the harbour today. Only skeleton staffs were maintained at local police stations. Also in the search were private launches and surf boats from local clubs. Social Security officers throughout the country have been told to give urgent consideration to any applications from Wahine survivors or the dependents of those who lost their lives. $5,000 from Golden Kiwi profits are to be made immediately available for assistance to survivors and dependents. And the Shipwreck Relief Society has donated another $5,000 for immediate relief. The wreck of the Wahine has completely upset the regular Littleton to Wellington steamer service. To fill the gap, the Maori will introduce daylight sailings. It'll make 5 sailings in each direction each week. Apart from tonight's sailing from Wellington, all forward bookings on the Maori have been cancelled, and intending passengers must rebook on the amended timetable. The 2 railways ferries, Aramoana and Aranui, are also making extra trips between Wellington and Picton. The wrecked ship has attracted large crowds of sightseers, and for most of the day traffic has been thronging the streets around Port Dorset. Survivors of the disaster, who are still in the Wellington and Hutt hospitals, were visited today by officers of the Social Security Department. Where necessary, the officers made on-the-spot payments. 106 people were originally sent to hospital, but many have been discharged. 1 small boy is in a serious condition. Rescue operations last night even extended to the fire brigade. Bill Alexander spoke to the 3rd Officer Varley of the Wellington Brigade.
We received a call from the harbour board between 12:30 and 1:15 to provide pumps and manpower to go out to the Wahine.
And the intention was to pump her out?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, you got on the pilot launch. How far did you get before you found out that you weren't going to need the equipment?
Well, we boarded the Arahina at Queen's Wharf and proceeded with a couple of policemen and the harbour board crew out, and just, I think, off Massey Memorial, they received a radio message to say that obviously it was too late, the pumping wasn't going to be any use at that stage, and that people were in the water, and we were directed across to the Eastbourne area where survivors were in the water, both in boats, in life dinghies, and actually in the water themselves.
What were the conditions like on the sea at the time?
Well, fairly calm till we got across to the Eastbourne area, and then it was quite frightening, believe you me. There were some quite big waves, by I think anybody's estimation, with 15 feet at least, I should think, some of them, and see these people in the water. in this sort of condition was fairly sort of frightening.
Did you manage to pick any of them up?
Oh yes, we took quite a few on board the Wahine from in the water and from a dinghy. We missed an awful lot. An awful lot were being swept out of our reach and was being swept dangerously close inshore, too far for the launch master to get the Wahine in. In fact, I think at one stage he thought he'd touched the bottom and we backed out very quickly, and with those sort of seas, this could have wrecked it, I should imagine, very easily.
You said the search would go on for some time. Does this mean perhaps
Well, it may be necessary for a week or a fortnight, I don't know, but it's an extensive search today, tomorrow.
Is the police involved in finding accommodation for people or clothing or cases of distress?
I think the Union Steamship Company undertook responsibility for that, and I think they did a marvellous job.
Children, last night we had reports of at least 5 children separated from their families and in hospital. Have you been handling that side?
There was a report last night of 3 children in hospital, unidentified. They have since been identified and claimed.
2 more in the Hut Hospital as well.
Well, I don't think there was any doubt as to their identity. They were older children.
So there are no children whose identity has not been established?
Survivors.
In hospital, yes. When will bodies be released for burial after they can possibly identify them?
The coroner releases the bodies to burial when he's satisfied.
Can the morgue accommodate all these bodies?
Have done so.
Up to the present.
What about...
Well, the situation will ease as they become identified and their bodies are released for burial, and then they'll be taken away by the undertakers concerned.
So they are being sort of released for burial along as the coroner sees them, or is he waiting to get all of them?
Well, no, he'll deal with them individually.
This afternoon, Fred Cockram spoke to the chairman of the Union Steamship Company, Mr. McFarlane.
McFarlane, in view of the weather at the time that the Wahine began to enter the harbour, would it not perhaps have been safer for her to have waited outside?
I don't think that's a question that I could answer. The master of any ship is in complete charge when he is at sea and when he's in port.
Would the Wahine have been safe in the rough weather, perhaps, had there been better lighting, buoys, things like this at the entrance to Wellington Harbour?
Well, of course, this again is a question for the technical experts, and I would think that there is no question that the leads and the lights and so forth are well proven for entering Wellington Harbour.
At the time when it was becoming obvious to people on shore that there was in fact some serious trouble with the Wahine, the company's official statement still persisted in saying that there was nothing seriously wrong. Was there any particular reason for this?
Well, no reason at all, except that we were in constant communication with the ship, with radio telephone, and we knew exactly what was going on all the time. And the messages indicated that the ship and the passengers were in reasonable safety.
When did the company get the first indication that this might not be the case?
I think we got the first indication about shortly after 1:30, when the extreme storm conditions that we were having fortuitously abated. And the flotilla of small boats that went out, I mean, deserve all the credit in the world, as you know. I mean, our own tugs went out, the Moana went out, and every attempt was made to alleviate the situation once the master found that the ship was listing rather more than she had been in the early stages of her dragging down the harbour.
It has been suggested that in circumstances such as this, it's often a good idea to have a larger vessel standing to break the wind to enable smaller vessels to pick up survivors. I understand there were, I think, 5 other Union Company ships in port at the time. Why was this not done?
I think there was one other Union Company ship in port, that was the Cartier, and we did toy with the idea around about 1 o'clock of sending the ship out, but the harbour master would not allow her to leave her berth in the stormy conditions that were existing at that time.
Were there any other ships at all in port that perhaps would have been safe under the conditions that could have been used in this way?
No, I don't think so. This, again, is a matter for technical experts, nautical experts. But to our way of thinking, we we sieved right down to the bottom of the Tim to try and alleviate and do whatever we could to assist not only the ship but the passengers.